Welcome to the Take the North podcast here on your free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm David Haugh from the Mully and Haugh Show, Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune, covering the Bears and getting just done with the first rookie minicamp. Dan, 10 drafted rookies, a host of undrafted free agents, other guys on tryouts of getting stories that they will tell the rest of their lives probably for that weekend. They were wearing the big helmet with the C on the side. What was overall the right way to view what happened at Halas Hall over the weekend? And, I guess we'll talk about on this podcast moving forward kind of what stood out and what certain guys showed in their first glimpse as a Chicago Bear.
Yeah, we got a pair of 62 player practices to watch in a early May weekend out in Lake Forest. You know as well as I do that there's probably 12 to 13 of those guys who ultimately matter in the big picture for the Chicago Bears. But I think there's two things that I kind of think about as the weekend comes to a close. Number one, it's the start of a very important phase for a team that's had so much roster turnover, right? And this is the infusion of new talent that came through the draft that we got to see this weekend on the practice fields at Halas Hall. Next week, Tuesday, OTAs begin. And so we'll blend the rookies with the veterans and we'll get our first look at what this team looks like when they're all together on the field. And we're going to be familiarizing ourselves with new jersey numbers, new faces, new talent, and seeing how everybody fits. But I think when it relates to the rookies, David, it's a good opportunity to just lay eyes on these guys and see what it looks like. For me, obviously, you're looking at Darnell Wright first. You find the 58 jersey, you see what 6'5", 335 looks like in person. You see the combination of size, strength, agility, all the things that the Bears raved about. And you go, yeah, that guy looks like a 7 to 8 year starting offensive tackle in the NFL. And you feel good about that. You take a look at how fast Tyler Scott runs and you go, okay, it wasn't just a myth. That track speed is real. You take little inventory glimpses at things like that. And then at the end of the weekend, you realize that it's early May and you really just kind of have to keep everything in perspective as we try to figure out the road that this team is on.
I know it's a really simple, dumb question, but it's kind of one of the things that serves the purpose of these camps is, did anybody look out of shape? Did anybody look terribly winded going through? And I know the answer is probably no, these guys stay in shape. But I do think sometimes when you get somebody in front of you and you see them, going through the drill, you've learned a couple things that are all intangibles. I think all this weekend was intangibles. Is this a front of the line guy during drills? Is this a guy that's going to view practice as a necessary evil or an opportunity to get better? Did any of those practice traits or habits emerge as something that would be significant?
Nothing notable, but it is worth bringing up because I do remember I think it was rookie camp when Eddie Goldman was a rookie. It was either a rookie camp or the first OTAs, but I'm pretty sure it was rookie camp where he had to leave the first practice early. He was dehydrated and wasn't feeling well and had to leave. And you go, okay, not the greatest first impression. Obviously, Eddie overcame that and became a key piece in a defense that was the best in the league the last time that they were a championship team in this city. But nothing jumped out on that end. I think, the other part of it for us in the media is it's a chance to talk to a lot of people. So you talk to all the draft picks, you talk to the coordinators for the first time since the Bears made all these moves across the depth chart. You talk to the position coaches for the first time. You get Matt Eberflus again. And so you start to get a little bit better handling on the visions that these coaches have for things coming together with their particular unit, how they're going to come together with this team. And you understand, David, in my opinion, the Bears have put a lot of chips on the table of traits. We talked last week, big, long, fast, and now they want to take a coaching staff that they believe in and take a lot of guys with traits and turn them into something maybe more than they've ever been. It's going to be a pretty big challenge, and it's something that we'll obviously chronicle every step of the way.
And just communicating via text or otherwise with a couple of football people who were actually there this weekend, again, which we were talking about is bearing. You got to keep that in mind. Don't overreact. But a couple things I wanted to at least mention. Number one, how fluid Darnell Wright looked for how big of a man that he is, and somebody who's, whether he's 330 or 340 or 325, maybe depends on what time of day he's weighed. But he did look like somebody who is going to be scheme specific and fluid enough to do the kinds of things in this zone blocking scheme you want him to do, and really was impressive for a big guy to be that athletic. The other thing I thought was interesting was it was pointed out to me just how the stature of Tyreek Stevenson at cornerback, the guy who you see on tape and he looks really good, but you wonder about sometimes the things you see on tape. But in person, he kind of looked the part as an NFL cornerback. Like, that's the beauty of these rookie mini camps. From sometimes the purpose is seeing exactly what you've got when you draft them. And Tyreek Stevenson, you could see uh, easily, not easily, but kind of being a day one starter, week one
Yeah.
starter on the outside as Kyler Gordon moves inside. And the last thing is, I bring this up for amusement, and I think it was for my own benefit because the person knew what I was kind of looking for. Tyson Bagent could throw the ball pretty well for a small school quarterback. Looked like a guy that at least had some skills, and it was easy to understand how he would succeed at Division II level. Not necessarily makes him an NFL quarterback, but looks like a guy who could at least earn a living holding a clipboard or learning a system, and did not look overwhelmed necessarily.
Nobody has been pushing the urge for QB4 like David Haugh and the Take
Right,
the North podcast. So
right.
yes, you did have a Division II quarterback throwing passes at a camp because they needed a Division II quarterback to throw passes at a rookie camp. I don't know how long Tyson Bagent's stay is going to be in Lake Forest. We'll see a lot more when he's throwing against professional football players and not just rookie minicamp tryout players a week from now if he's given that opportunity, and we'll see how long it goes on that end. But look, there's always intriguing stories, and it's so hard because a lot of these guys, as you mentioned, aren't here for very long. 62 of them were here over the weekend. Some of them are draft picks that are obviously going to be a part of this team. They signed 3 guys on Monday to contracts, and so you try to make the most of your window opportunity and see where it goes. But I wouldn't start putting any sort of watch on Justin Fields' job security just yet, based
I'm
on
not,
what Tyson Bagent did.
I'm not. I'm just appreciating the success level because this guy's now got a
Yeah,
story for the rest of his life.
yeah,
He
yeah.
was in a Bears uniform, whatever that means. He was at an NFL camp.
Maybe maybe
In
he'll make it
10
a training
years,
camp, and
yeah.
and he'll have more of a story, right? And those are the fun ones, right? When they're here for a few months, and now you get to draw it out as long as possible.
So the among the news on Monday was that the Bears did sign a couple of the undrafted free agents. One was the defensive pass rusher from Houston. Was it DeAnthony Thomas? Is that
See,
I,
this is where we're at right now in the offseason because I don't even have the name in front of me. I'm going to pull it up as we talk.
I, I'm gonna figure,
But
but I just wonder, guys like that are the kinds of finds that exist on these kinds of weekends, and you can find, late round projects.
D'Anthony Jones,
DeAnthony Jones,
and then they
DeAnthony
signed an
Jones.
offensive lineman,
Mhm.
Josh Lugg, a
Okay.
defensive back, Braylon Trahan, and then a veteran tight end, Stephen Carlson, who had spent 3 years in the league previously, was able to be out there, and is at least going to add to that room in the short term in the spring.
So not a whole lot of impact kind of things, but fun depth pieces. And we would look back. I mean, a year ago at this time, I'm not quite sure anybody anticipated Jack Sanborn to be a guy that would
Right.
be a mid-season sensation and have a nice little run there as he did. And now he's in a position to go into training camp as a starter. He'll be challenged. Noah Sewell will be somebody I think that gives him a run for his playing time in the base defense. But these are the kinds of stories that when you are a 3-14 football team, you've got room on that depth chart and you've got opportunity galore.
Yeah, I do think that this coaching staff is really eager to see competition heighten in 2023, and they feel like in several rooms they've got an opportunity to make guys that are worthy fight for their roles, and that's when a bad football team gets better, and when a better football team gets good, and then eventually a good football team becomes a championship contender. When you have that level of depth and competition, where every day has that urgency and that edge to it and that fight to it, and so it's going to be interesting to watch that play out in the weeks to come. Again, like OTAs are just around the corner here, and I know the Bears are going to have a lot of time to kind of figure out what pieces fit where. But that competition level, I think, will be notable early, and it will be early notable often.
We're going to get to some of the comments by Luke Getsy that I thought was very interesting. It's the first time we've heard from Luke in a long time. Wanted to get your thoughts on a couple of the other assistants who spoke and specifically kind of what they said. Richard Hightower, the special teams coordinator, I felt like said some interesting things as it pertained to Velus Jones and competition. He also talked about how the value, you mentioned Tyler Scott and also Roshan Johnson. These are young men who are going to maybe have roles in the offense, but I think that he sounded excited about their potential contributions on the special teams. That's why they were drafted, because they had shown a willingness and an ability to contribute in the kicking game. And that's not something that you overlook, especially when you're talking about rookies.
The work is usually heaviest for a special teams coordinator when you have this level of roster turnover because you're mixing and matching so many new pieces. You have to figure out what your offensive coordinator wants to protect in his room, what your defensive coordinator wants to protect in his room, and you've got to find guys that can be there for you. Roshan Johnson, we talked about, has gotten every superlative of praise and adjective that can be thrown at him in his first 2 weeks as a Chicago Bear. Richard Hightower was another one to add to the list of testimonials over the weekend, saying, look, like you watch the Texas film and you watch this guy cover kickoffs and he plays violent. And so there's an excitement that you've got a running back that can go down and tackle some people on special teams willingly and aggressively. And so you've got that piece of the puzzle. Roshan Johnson played 4 phases in college. It's no, mystery to him what special teams is about, and he's willing to do it and should make an impact there quickly and for as long as he's needed until he maybe potentially climbs the ladder in the running backs room. So that'll be interesting to see. And then, like again, with Richard and the pieces he's got to put together on special teams, you just have to find who your leaders are and who those guys are that can be tone setters. DeAndre Houston Carson was here for a long time. He was kind of the guy after Sherrick McManus who wore that special teams, crown as the guy that you look to every week to give that unit a jolt. He's still on the street. So you have to find a replacement there and somebody that can jump in and be that guy for you.
Could he be that guy? Could they bring him back? Why not?
It's possible. I don't know at this point why he's still available, because you think a guy like that who has been so team first, so selfless, so capable of handling roles that you want as a depth piece hasn't found a home either here or elsewhere yet.
But we've seen others examples of guys around the league, veterans still unsigned, that might have overestimated their value in free agency and maybe are just waiting for the dust to settle on some of these depth charts and roster spots as teams kind of fill in rookies wherever they can. Maybe DHC ends up back in Chicago where he has been, a very quiet but steady contributor.
No question. Yeah. And so that, look, this roster is going to be fluid. Rich Campbell used to call it roster mechanics, and they're going to happen weekly, from now through pretty much Labor Day. Guys in the door, guys out the door, guys out the door who come back in, new guys who come in, old guys who get sent out. It's going to be like this. This churn is going to be ongoing for a while, and we'll obviously keep tab on it.
Did Richard Hightower leave the door open for Velus Jones to be challenged as the primary return person? Do you think that's
the door is open.
okay?
I mean, there's going to be challengers for everything right now, and I think that's kind of one of the key messages from all the coaches up there. You even heard it in Darnell Wright's voice on Friday, where he said something to the effect of like, "Yeah, I got drafted. Well, now I got to fight to earn a roster spot." And I wanted to raise my hand and say, Darnell, like, you could probably take a deep breath here. I'm pretty sure you're going to be on the week 1 roster in September. Really, no worries there. But there are a lot of guys that have to understand that there's nothing guaranteed, and that nothing is safe, and no role is there for them. And so that's going to be part of this offseason for sure.
Along the lines of what roles different players will play, I thought it was interesting to hear Alan Williams ask a question about how important the 3 technique defensive tackle is in this scheme. And we've talked about it all off season long. And then he corrected the questioner and basically interjected that, hey, we have a 3 technique tackle in this defense, and Justin Jones is that guy. And they're going to rely on waves of defensive linemen coming in, like the great, not good, he corrected himself there too, great defenses do, which I think was his way of answering the question. Number one, they feel good about Justin Jones. And secondly, it doesn't really matter where Jerron Dexter and Zach Pickens fit in specifically. They're going to be part of a movement, a committee, if you will, of defensive linemen. They're going to try to, stop the run and rush the quarterback.
Well, it's notable that you said that, because I don't know that I have heard Justin Jones's name mentioned since February, right? And even I had to sit up straight in my chair and go, "Oh, that's right." Right, like he's still number 1 on the depth chart at 3 tech, and even though they took 2 hybrid defensive tackles on day 2 of the draft and a third late in the draft in round 7, you've still got a guy here who was kind of the plan B when the Larry Ogunjobi signing fell through, who came in and played pretty well. It goes underappreciated because the defense fell apart dramatically in the final 10 games of last season, allowed, I think, 33.1 points per game in their 10-game losing streak to end the year. We're giving up more than 400 yards per game during that stretch. And it was just a gross display of Bears defense. Well, now you've got to get that improved, and some of that's going to start with the guys who are already in-house. Justin Jones is one of those guys. And so when we get back to OTAs next week, you say, okay, you're not the forgotten man anymore. You're the guy taking the first team reps, and now it's your turn to take advantage of the window of opportunity that's there for you. there is, there's just a puzzle here that needs to be put together. And Alan Williams will do it on offense or on defense. Luke Getsy will do it on offense. Matty Eberflus will oversee everything. And hopefully by the time we get to September, we have a better sense of what this team's identity is supposed to be.
So we did hear from the great Getsy, Luke Getsy, first time in a while that he has been behind the microphone. Certainly the first time since the Bears drafted the presumed starter at right tackle in Darnell Wright. And Dan, I'll let you set up the question because of the way that it was asked and answered by Luke Getsy about the role that Darnell Wright will play in this offense.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, Luke's first extensive experience with Darnell Wright came in Mobile at the Senior Bowl, and he's coaching the American team down there, and he gets an opportunity for a week to work with that team. And Darnell Wright being part of that process gave Luke an opportunity to see what this looked like up close. The scouting staff is obviously taking care of all the scouting reports initially, and Ryan Poles in the front office and the talent evaluation team is doing their own gathering. But Luke sees a guy who looks the part, and works with a guy who says, okay, there's some things there. And I wouldn't say that was the pivot point in convincing the Bears to draft Darnell Wright, but it certainly was part of their process. And so we had a chance to kind of ask Luke about what he sees in Darnell Wright in his skill set. And here was some of that exchange.
I just think it's unique for someone that big to be able to bend and be that athletic and as explosive as he is. I think that's just it's hard to come around guys that are that big, that long. Like the length is unbelievable and the power is unbelievable, and then be able to have that athleticism go with it too was all really cool.
You've got two tackles that can really move in space now. What does that do for you as an offensive coordinator when you guys on either edge can really do like that?
Well, I mean that's kind of the history of what I've been around in this league. I mean, having athletic offensive linemen is really valuable to what we want to do and what we want to accomplish. So I think as many of those types of guys that we can get is just going to make us better for sure and getting to do what we want to do.
So athletic offensive lineman, Dan, there was a day when that was an oxymoron, but I don't think we're in those days any longer because you've got to be able to move. Let's face it, you go back to free agency and some of us kept beating the drum for Orlando Brown Jr., and it was always kind of the undercurrent. Well, he's not a good scheme fit here because of some of the things that stylistically, and he may not have been that kind of guy, fluid as an athlete. And so I think sounds like Darnell Wright and Braxton Jones give them the prototype of the kind of tackles they're looking for in this scheme to make it work. So now they just got to stay healthy because it's a nice problem to have. I always liken it to, you look at like the Cubs are in our midst, right? And you're talking about developing young pitching and drafting and developing guys who will be in your rotation for a while. Offensive tackles is kind of the same mentality. You love the idea and the possibility of having Braxton Jones on the left side and Darnell Wright on the right side. They're not perfect. They're going to be flawed. But, boy, if they could develop on the same pace, that's going to be great for the Chicago Bears.
See, you've used the word 3 times, which is the operative word in this whole discussion. It's develop. Those guys both have to develop. They have to stay healthy, and then they have to develop. Braxton Jones, and I've had these conversations with people inside the building there, was considered a success in 2022, largely because he was a 5th-round pick out of Southern Utah. In 2023, he's a veteran offensive tackle starting and protecting Justin Fields' blind spot. So the entire grading scale is changed. The curve is different now. You're going to be evaluated differently. And so now you have to perform as a veteran starting left tackle in this league and figure out if you can be a standout at that position. Because if you can't, then they've got to turn in a different direction and figure out which way it goes. Darnell Wright looks like a guy that has all the skills and all the intangibles to be a guy that you can build with for the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Well, one of the questions, I wouldn't call it a concern, but questions that teams had about Darnell Wright through the pre-draft process was, does this guy have the wiring to give you everything he has all the time? The Bears put that to the test in the now well-documented private workout in Knoxville on April 8th last month. Well, you passed that test for one day in Tennessee on your home campus. Now can you pass it for 6 years? Every single day in that building. And so that's part of his development is figuring out whether that beast that he showed throughout that entire day, that no quit, determined, monster, is going to be there every single day to help propel this offense to heights that it hasn't seen in a long time.
When is that documentary on Hulu anyway? The documentary of that workout?
Yeah, it should be, I think, probably by Halloween.
Okay, that's good to know. All right, so Luke Getsy also, this is the first time that, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but I think the first time we've got to hear what he thought about the trade that brought DJ Moore back in return, and he was excited to talk about what DJ Moore means to Justin Fields and also the play caller.
Yeah, you'll hear a couple questions here for Luke. Notably to me, Luke didn't really remember where he was when he learned of the DJ Moore trade. I know where I was. I think you know where you were. Luke, it kind of slipped his memory, but he knows that they've gotten a tier 1 receiver here to catalyze this offense, in particular the passing attack, and help Justin Fields have a guy that he can count on in big moments to go get the football. Go get us a first down, go get us in the end zone, go turn this 3 into 7. Let's see what we can do. Here was the string of questions we asked Luke about DJ Moore.
Quarterback receiver relationship, we've talked about this in here, is so important, right? I mean, I think that, as great of a quarterback it can be, or as great of a receiver can be, if there's not a relationship and a connection between the two of them, then it doesn't really matter. And so I think they're in that phase right now of getting to know each other. What's cool is DJ's experiences that he's had. He's had to play with a few different quarterbacks and a few different systems. So you can tell that he doesn't really get fazed by the new, which is going to be really good. And then once those two can communicate with one another, body language, quick communication verbally and stuff, I think all that will get better as we get going. And it's been fun to see those guys throw some routes on air as we, we're in this phase 2 part of it.
Where were you when you got word of that addition?
Of DJ?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Probably somewhere with one of my kids, somewhere doing something, but I'm not sure. For sure. I have a lot of friends that have coached in Carolina, and immediately when it happened, they all called and just talked about the kind of man that we're getting on this football team more than anything. So we're really, really, really excited about that.
How do you not remember the moment in your offseason your career changed?
I mean, I don't know if it was just a brain fart. Maybe we can probe him later on and get more specifics on that. But that was an interesting moment. He's obviously very excited to have DJ in that receiver's room and to really up the level of competition for the guys below him. I think there's an expectation inside Halas Hall that at the minimum, Darnell Mooney will be ready for training camp. All buzz that I've heard has pointed to the direction that Darnell will be ready to go when they put the helmets and uniforms on for the first training camp practice. Conceivably, he could be ready before the veteran minicamp is over. We're just going to have to keep eyes on this over the next month to see where he is. Is he off to the side doing anything? Can we see with our own eyes how he looks jogging around, moving around? Me with injuries. It's like I need to see things rather than hear things about a player that's suffered a significant injury. Darnell certainly in that case.
DJ Moore, Chase Claypool, Darnell Mooney, Equanimity St. Brown, Velus Jones, Dante Pettis, Tyler Scott. There's 7 receivers in that room. Am I missing anybody? That's a pretty crowded room, but it's also one that has more depth than they have had since this regime arrived, certainly.
Right, and it's easy to get sort of hung up and be like, oh well, there's 7 names that we know here, and so that means they've got a better receiving core. Well, there's a lot of question marks on a lot of those names. Chase Claypool, a lot of question marks. Velus Jones, a lot of question marks. I think we've documented that Equanimity St. Brown and Dante Pettis are here until they're not. So now it's like, what are the questions that these other guys can answer? I think DJ Moore's question that he has to answer is how quickly can he get up to speed with Justin Fields? You feel confident about that because of the number of different quarterbacks he had to play with in Carolina and how his production was fairly consistent over the entirety of his time there because he was able to adapt and adjust. But, a lot of these guys have a lot to prove here. I think the Bears put their arms around that and say, good, now go prove it. And the guys who don't prove it will be kicked to the side, and we'll go with the guys who did prove something.
Same logic applies in the backfield, where at running back, you have Khalil Herbert. You've got Dante Foreman. You've got Travis Homer, and you've got the rookie Roshan Johnson. All guys who will be in the mix for carries, right? You've got 4 guys that we don't quite know exactly how they're going to be used. But we do know that Khalil Herbert will get the first carry in the first team practice. Yeah. That's what Luke Getsy had to say. What else did he have to say, Dan, in terms of the running back usage?
Well, yeah, and David Walker, the running backs coach, said that the only thing I can tell you is that Khalil Herbert will get the first rep of the first team drill the next time we practice, and after that, all bets are off, which means that it's an open competition. Khalil Herbert led the NFL last year in yards per rush attempt for running backs that had over 80 attempts. Pretty good season for Khalil Herbert. And now he's being pushed by a guy in Dante Foreman, who after Christian McCaffrey was traded to San Francisco, had his breakthrough. and had his big surge forward as an NFL running back. And now he's being challenged by Roschon Johnson, who has been labeled a pillar of the organization in his first 2 weeks as a Bear. And Travis Homer, who was kind of a second wave free agent signing to be a special teams piece and a guy who can come in when needed, he's going to have to fight for a job. By the way, you got Kari Blasingame, who's a fullback, who's probably going to eat up a roster spot for you if that's something you want to do with your offense. So now you've got a lot of mouths trying to eat, and now they're going to have to try to do this in a healthy competition through May, through June, through July, through August. And then when we get to September, we got to know who's doing what and what's expected of them.
Let me just say, I respect the fact that you never forget to remember the fullback, and I know that you keep on bringing him up.
Just because it's a numbers game, right? Like, and that's a number. If you're going to dedicate a roster spot to a long snapper, and you're going to dedicate it, it's just one less spot that you have available, and so it just heightens the urgency for the other guys to show what they're made of, so that they can figure in and have a seat in that classroom when the regular season begins.
Let's hear from Luke Getsy about what he had to say about the seats, people filling the seats in that classroom.
I would say the vision isn't necessarily set yet, but I think it's a really cool, unique opportunity with a lot of guys that have a lot of experience. I think the competition in that room is going to be real, and so we're going to get to see the best come out of each one of those guys. And it's super important for that position to have multiple guys that can do it, right? I mean, I don't know if there's any team that can rely on one guy anymore with the pounding and the length of the season and all that stuff. So I think it's awesome that we have as many guys as we do that we feel like we can count on.
That's depth that they're proud of. And Dan, I think that it's going to be an interesting to see how it unfolds because of how high they are on Roschon Johnson and just how much he looks the part. And I don't know, I guess this is maybe a kind of thing you say in early May. I don't know how Khalil Herbert fits because I don't know what they think of him. I don't know if he can stay healthy, and I don't know what they think of him if he does stay healthy, because let's face it, he was here when they arrived, and he's not one of their guys, unlike Deontay Foreman, who they went out and signed, and Roschon Johnson, who they went out and drafted.
Yeah, and he was a 6th-round pick, out of Virginia Tech by way of Kansas, and not a guy that came into the league with a lot of hype and hullabaloo surrounding him. And he's had a nice couple years to start his career, but now you're going to be challenged to have a nicer year, and to show that you deserve to be a lead dog on a team that's trying to chase bigger goals than the Bears have been chasing the last couple of years. And so, look, this will all play out. And I think that there's a confidence within the coaching staff that, this is a Foxyism from back in the day that, we don't make those decisions. Those guys make those decisions. That these guys will put it on video with their practice habits, with the way they work, with the way they produce in the preseason. And then by the time it comes time to make a decision, Labor Day weekend, they'll have plenty of intel to feel confident that their decision is the right one.
This whole pod was worth it just for that imitation of John
I'll
Fox.
do it every week if I have to.
I know you deliver every single time. All right, last thing about Getsy, because it's not something that we have audio of, but I want to get your impressions of. That the conversation was going to be steered toward maybe begin with what's the latest with Justin Fields. First of all, a hearty congratulations to Justin Fields, who graduated from The Ohio State University on Sunday. Kevin Warren was there. It was a terrific accomplishment and says a lot about the young man's character, in my mind, that he was able to kind of continue the path and finish the job that he started in Columbus after transferring from Georgia. Good for Justin Fields. He doesn't need a degree necessarily, but he's got one. Who knows what's going to be in his future, but he's equipped now. So I give him a lot of credit for doing that.
I zoomed in on the degree in the picture that was on social media. It was a Bachelor of Science in Human Ecology. As long as that was not a deep fake picture, that was what the diploma from The Ohio State University read. So Justin's got his BS in human ecology, and now it's time to get his master's in passing, right?
Bingo! I was waiting for the tweet from Dan Wiederer saying now the rest of his education can continue in Chicago.
And it's an important part of his education now. It's the one that's going to make him and his family
exactly
money.
It's the reason. Yeah, the rest of the education will make that diploma moot, right? It won't be a factor. But I think that really says a lot about his discipline and being able to do that. Ohio State does a nice job of keeping those players on track. But back to Getsy.
Wait, before you move on, I just want to say
All right.
that Justin looked a lot fresher in his graduation day photos than I did back in 1998. I was so hungover on graduation day, and the line at the water fountain outside the College of Communications graduation ceremony was like 35 people deep because everyone just needed to get a little water in before that ceremony started.
Oh my God, was that down in Champaign, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
ILLOMG.
having
Yeah.
flashbacks as we talk about it.
Well, I also think that when you talk about his degree in what was it again? What did he get his degree
Bachelor
in?
of Science in Human Ecology.
Wow. So what would you do with that if you weren't playing football?
I don't know. I don't know if there's anything within there that allows your feet to have better rhythm and timing, because those were the buzzwords that were being spoken again this weekend by Matt Eberflus, by Andrew Janocko. That seems to be what the Bears are pressing in terms of the ability to get this passing game unlocked is creating rhythm and timing. Right now, to this point in the offseason, all they're doing is throwing routes on air. So you can say he's got better rhythm and timing. How do you know? There's nobody blocking. There's no one rushing you. There's no defense playing. Pretty soon we'll get more and more of those opportunities to look at that. But man, they've got to get this solved.
I'm just shocked that Justin Fields was embarking on this educational path, completing papers, and nobody in Chicago sports radio was raving about the quality of his thesis papers.
You should have read it.
I know. I imagine how great they were, and the tremendous vocabulary and everything that would have been overstated. But congratulations to Justin Fields. Luke Getsy said that Justin Fields is light years ahead of where he was a year ago. Dan, I want to know this because I said this on the morning show with Mully and Haugh. I didn't have it in front of me. Hasn't Luke Getsy used that measurement before? Hasn't he used light years as a way of telling you how much Justin Fields has improved?
Just to give you the proper context of that, I believe the sort of frame that he put around that was in terms of what the coaching staff sees in him, and even in terms of what the media and the outside world sees in him, he's light years ahead of where he was at this time last year. So Luke was answering a question directly about why the Bears did not pivot this offseason to take one of those class of 2023 quarterbacks, which they had the opportunity to do. He said he did his due diligence as he would every year in assessing the quarterbacks. Obviously, that decision is way above his pay grade. And so it was kind of another voice in saying the reason that we stayed down this path is because we saw things in Justin's development. We saw things in the direction the arrow is pointing, which is, in their opinion, light years ahead of where it was in May of 2022. And so they want to see it through, as we've talked about before. Now it's a matter again of putting all this to the test in what is, you agree with me on this. I'm pretty sure that we're going to know when this regular season ends on January 7th, what direction the Bears should go with their quarterback position. It shouldn't be a lot of gray area, 8-9 months from now.
I'm still caught up on the light years thing, Dan. I can't get past that. I just think it's an odd measurement to use in terms of measuring where a quarterback is and how much he's improved.
Yeah,
maybe I'll get past that though.
We'll press him further on that, and listen. I mean,
was he an astronomy major? Where did Luke Getsy go? Akron or Pitt? Didn't he go to both? Was he a transfer? I need to know more about his education.
Yeah, Studs is going to have to get on the wiki page when he gets a chance and get us the resume. Look, like Luke is going to be asked probably no fewer than 743 questions about Justin before the next time that they play a meaningful game. And so there's going to be a lot of answers, and there's going to be a lot of interpretation of those answers. This was a small little nugget from May, and we'll get you past it by June.
And the next time he mentions light years, just think of me. Okay, last thing. We need to, I think, clarify things for some people out there who might be a little confused by some broadcast reports in Chicago that were not accurate, and Peter King doubled down on that idea. Football Morning in Chicago, Football Morning in America. The Bears are not expected to be playing in Germany, contrary to broadcast reports. Correct, Dan?
Is my understanding that when the schedule is released, presumably later this week, which is now seems like it might be in a little bit of question because the league's still trying to finalize some things, that the Chiefs would either be hosting their game in Frankfurt against either the Lions or the Dolphins. It would come as a shock to everyone inside the building at Hallis Hall if the Bears were the team that was invited to play in Germany. you mentioned the Peter King nugget from Monday morning that said that the Chiefs specifically requested to not have the Bears game be the one that's played over there. And you could understand why they would make that request, because Bears fans travel, and that city is going to be packed with people from Chicago and all over the country cheering on the Bears and spending money in Kansas City. And so certainly there's probably a matter of civic pride that comes into that. But yeah, it's my understanding that if we get some sort of announcement that the Bears are going to Germany, and I've got to make sure that my passport is renewed and up to date, that everyone in the Bears organization would be scrambling as much as I would be, and maybe as much as you would be as well.
All three of your passports.
Why three?
Your aliases. You got to keep a low profile around Chicago sometime during the season. Also, Adam Studzinski, our ace reporter, points out that Luke Getsy started at Pitt and transferred to Akron. So I did have those things down. And as a quarterback, he was light years ahead of where he was at Pittsburgh when he played for the Zips. So that's good to know. All right, so no Germany trip. Anything else that's going to happen this week before the big schedule reveal, which is scheduled for Thursday night?
Well, I'll throw this out here for you because you weren't here last week when Herb Howard and I talked about it, but the Bears have been pushing towards crossover practices this year, and that their preference is to do them on the road. They only have one road trip on the schedule this August, and it's my understanding that the wheels are in motion for a 5-day business trip to Indianapolis, the great city of a friend of the podcast, Rich Campbell, home of the Scouting Combine. The Indianapolis Colts also play in practice there, and so Matt Eberflus would have a chance to go back to his old building. Same with Dave Borgonski and Alan Williams. Ryan Poles would have a chance to reunite with Chris Ballard after their days together in the Chiefs front office. There'd be a lot of reasons that this thing would make sense. It seems to be the way it's pointing. There would be 3 days of practices. Then you have your off day. Then you have your game, your preseason game, in which most of the starters wouldn't play.
And you've got two front offices that are very friendly with each other besides the connections that you mentioned. Chris Ballard, Ryan Poles worked together in Kansas City. Chris Ballard, former Bears scout, the guy credited with discovering and finding Tommy Harris. Not that hard to find him, but I think that he was the scout on the scene at that point in time, pounding the table for him. He's done a nice job, and Indy needs to win this season, may make some interesting decisions. Dan, this is a total aside, but speaking of the Colts, did you see Jim Irsay's tweet about reminding people about stay away from Andrew Luck, because anybody talking to Andrew Luck, the quarterback, about coming out of retirement, you're tampering.
Yeah, there was a report from ESPN that the Commanders were casting such a wide net last year that they had at least asked some people some questions about the potential availability of Andrew Luck, and so that set off Jimmy Irsay. He got on Twitter like he's prone to do, and probably, David, after that was over, he sent that tweet, went home, and rode his live bear that he has in the basement in the basement of his home down there in Indy. Maybe I get to see that. A 5-day business trip to Indy in August. I mean, what would be better than going to the
trip? I'm looking forward to that one. That's just that's pretty much anytime I can get to Indianapolis. I would love to do that. I'm looking forward to that. Maybe we could do a Take the North podcast from Indianapolis.
Why wouldn't we be able to?
We're gonna do that.
Can we do that? Can we get to like Harry and Izzy's and like rent out some space and get fed while we do it?
I think maybe get a sponsor out of the deal.
I'm so confident that business trip's going to come together that over the weekend I actually booked a hotel room for that business trip. So that's
a veteran move. I'll tell you, that is. By the way, if you're a team, the Washington Commanders, I could see maybe being interested in Andrew Luck, but my mind went to San Francisco. Goodness sakes, Andrew Luck going back to the Bay Area to save that team and lead them to a Super Bowl, that would be phenomenal.
I was in Indianapolis the night that Andrew Luck's retirement leaked out. He was kind of forced to announce it, a day or two before he wanted to. The sense coming out of that weekend was that Andrew Luck needed a lot of distance from professional football and the physical and mental demands that puts on a human being. And I don't get the sense that he's itching to get back in. I think it was more the sake of the Commanders being desperate in so many different ways to do what the Bears have been trying to do forever as well, and find somebody that can play quarterback for them for a long time, and so that'll be interesting to see how they do. They're on the schedule for the Bears this year. So when the schedule release comes out this week, we'll have a trip to Washington.
Great segue, because we will be predicting each game on the schedule, because it's not who you play, as we know, it's when you play them. And Thursday night we will be on here making our predictions. We'll release them and drop this on Friday morning on the Take the North podcast, so you can have our predictions and keep them and tell us how smart or dumb we are, depending on the outcome next fall.
It's a fun schedule. I mean, it really is. There's some good road trips on there. There's some good visits from rookies like Bryce Young and Bijan Robinson. You've got, I think, 3 new head coaches on the docket this year. I think the Bears only have 5 games against teams that played in the playoffs last year, so that is the benefit of the last place schedule. I do follow that up by saying all 17 games are against opponents that had better records than they did last year, because all 31 teams had more victories.
That's kind of that's mean-spirited right there at the end. That's a shot.
That's just my reminder, because there's always the exercise where people go through and go winnable game, and they circle all the winnable games and write them down as wins. And you say, well, all those other teams are pointing at you and going, winnable game, worst team in the league.
Guarantee you, the Bears game is circled on every opponent's schedule. So everybody doing a podcast in every city, not in Chicago, is saying that Bears game is a victory.
Right.
Okay.
So we'll predict those on Thursday night if the schedule is released as it has been rumored to be, and hopefully we'll have a clearer picture of where we go. As a reporter, the first things you're looking for are which holidays in my personal life do I have to explain away to my family members, 7 or 8 months in advance, so I don't get in trouble when they
start planning now. The excuse train. Yeah, I know. I've been there many times. Also, the Bears aren't expected to be playing in Germany, just to reinforce that. So take that. And we will talk about it when it comes out. Anything else I'm forgetting, Dan? I think we got to it all.
Yeah, no, it's a good week. It's a good week for getting some more clarity on what that schedule looks like, and I can't wait to see it date by date. David, the biggest twist on the schedule this year is the addition of the Black Friday Amazon game this year on the afternoon after Thanksgiving. I actually kind of am intrigued by it. I think I'd be up for that. I doubt they'd put the Bears in that slot. I think it's a 2 p.m. game on the Friday after Thanksgiving, but that could be fun.
Fridays for high school football. The NFL owns every other day. That's the day of the Indiana High School State football finals. I don't think they played the Illinois ones until Saturday, but Friday, I know it's Black Friday. Do you really have to own every single day, Roger Goodell? It's okay. We'll enjoy it, but still, that's my first reaction.
I'm sure you can carve out a couple hours to watch some NFL football on Black Friday.
I think you're probably right. Okay, that's all we got for this episode of the Take the North podcast on your free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. You can watch us too on the 670 The Scores YouTube page, and we will be back dropping this one early in the week on Tuesday morning, and we will drop our schedule predictions on Friday morning. So we're going to get back into a little bit of a rhythm here as the offseason progresses. Thank you for listening. I'm David Haugh for Dan Wiederer and Adam Sadzinski. Thanks for tuning in here to the Take the North podcast.
Great talk. See you out there.